Of course. Here's Section 1 as a self-contained narrative, capped at around 1,500 words, focusing on character introduction, setting, and establishing the central conflict. The dust tasted like iron and old ash, thick on the tongue and heavier in the air than any breathable element should be. Cadet Kayla Wren knelt at the edge of the crater, her gloved fingers brushing against a shredded combat vest half buried in the scorched dirt. The name tag was unreadable. She didn't need to know the name. The state of the vest told her everything. Something had torn through it from the inside. Behind her, the drop shuttle lifted with a hiss of hydraulics and a screech of pressure release, leaving her and 6 others on the surface of Derak 4, designated a high-risk recon zone by High Command. The planet's atmospheric conditions were barely stable. Its wildlife, they'd been told, was not. Kayla stood slowly, scanning the jagged horizon. Mountains loomed in the distance, black and glassy like cooled magma. Wind rolled over the barren landscape, whistling between sharp rock spires. Even through her suit, she could feel the pulse of something deep in the earth, like a beast breathing beneath the surface. The squad spread out with practiced motion. Sergeant Haven barked orders with the gravel tone of someone who'd survived too long and expected to die soon. He gave Kayla a brief, dismissive glance before motioning her toward the rear perimeter. "You're green. Stay behind. Don't play hero." Kayla nodded without protest. She was used to the doubt. Her armor looked standard issue, but it wasn't. Lighter, reinforced, custom fit for materials scavenged back on Veros Prime, her homeworld, where every day was a gauntlet against death by Fong, Claw, or Toxin. But that wasn't in her file. Officially, she was a cadet on her first deployment. She walked the rear edge of their formation, eyes sharp, muscles loose. Her squad mates, veterans from civilized worlds, talked in clipped phrases, relying on tactical scanners and drone support. Kayla relied on sound, the absence of birds, the crunch pattern beneath her boots, the way shadows moved without wind. By the time they reached the outpost, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long orange blades of light across the barren ground. The outpost was silent. Its steel gates were half open, one twisted on its hinges like it had been punched by something large and fast. Burn marks laced the walls, and a dark smear stretched from the entryway into the base like blood drawn by gravity. They moved in cautiously. The interior was worse. Bodies, or what remained, lay in fragmented clusters, skeletal remains scorched clean. Kayla studied one. No tooth marks, no signs of consumption, just pure precision kills. Some form of heat weapon, but with a pattern she couldn't place. It wasn't human. "Whatever did this didn't take trophies," muttered Corporal Drex, his voice shaky. "Or it didn't have to," Kayla replied, drawing a curious glance from Drex before he turned away. They reached the central command terminal, mostly intact. Data logs were scrambled, but Kayla managed to extract a garbled audio clip. Static interrupted by a ragged scream, followed by guttural clicks and a low-frequency growl that made her stomach tighten. "That's not natural," whispered another soldier. Even Haven looked uneasy. "Set up a perimeter. We'll wait for further orders." "No one goes off alone," Haven instructed. Night fell quickly on Derak 4. Twin moons rose like pale eyes, and the landscape shifted into sharp contrasts of shadow and light. The squad huddled behind barricades, setting up motion sensors and automated turrets. Kayla sat on a supply crate, chewing on a ration bar, scanning the horizon. Her nerves didn't fray like the others. This silence was an emptiness. It was the kind of stillness that came just before something lunged. She'd grown up in this kind of waiting. She didn't sleep. Not properly, just a half-doze while remaining aware of every sound, every thermal signature on the edges of the scanners. At some point near midnight, she heard it, a faint scraping, then silence, then again, closer. She rose without a word, stepping softly toward the source, motioning Drex to hold a position. He looked uncertain, but obeyed. Kayla edged along the wall of the outpost's east side, her hand resting near the grip of her knife. Not her rifle. Guns would be too loud. Then she saw it, barely more than a shape, bent low, its skin a shimmer that refracted the surrounding terrain, cloaking it almost completely. But Kayla had spent her life watching things that wanted to stay hidden. She knew how to unsee camouflage. It was tall, quadrupedal, armored in some places, exposed in others. Its head was elongated, triangular, and split open vertically like a blooming flower, revealing rows of glistening teeth and a soft inner membrane pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Kayla didn't move. It hadn't seen her yet. Or rather, it had seen her, but hadn't recognized her as prey. Then, abruptly, it turned and retreated into the darkness, soundless as a phantom. Kayla exhaled, not from fear, but surprise. Predators didn't run from prey. She returned to the squad, gave a sparse report. Haven didn't believe her, but Drex did. There was a tension now in the air, not panic, but dread wrapped in disbelief. They weren't alone. Something was stalking them, but not attacking. The next day brought confirmation. One of the outer turrets was dismantled, its circuits torn out, but the housing left intact. No tracks, no burn marks. Whatever it was smart. Too smart. Haven doubled the watch. The soldiers moved stiffly now, whispers of ghosts and hunters circling through hushed conversations. Kayla walked the perimeter in silence. The wind shifted and she caught a scent, faintly chemical like ozone and decay. She stopped at a shallow ridge just outside the outpost and crouched. The dust there was disturbed in a tight, symmetrical pattern, not from feet, from claws. 8 of them. She closed her eyes, remembering the cliff beasts of Veros that used distraction tactics and mimicry to isolate prey. She remembered their hunting formations, their retreat patterns when confronted with something outside their prey profile. That was the key. Kayla stood and returned to the ridge at dusk, alone this time. She brought a ration box and cracked it open, letting the smell disperse. She removed her helmet and let her hair fall to the side, exposing the scent glands just beneath her ear, another feature of her erosion adaptation most didn't know existed. Then she waited. When the creature came again, larger this time, flanked by 2 smaller variants, it moved differently, less predatory, more cautious. It stopped 10 meters from her, head cocked, its mouth opened, the inner membrane flaring. It emitted a low, almost questioning growl. Kayla didn't blink. She met its eyes, or where she thought its eyes might be. She didn't run, didn't attack. She simply stood bare-faced, unthreatening but unafraid. The thing took a step forward, then another. Behind her, the squad emerged from the outpost, weapons drawn. A shout cracked the air. A gun raised. The spell broke. The creature shrieked once, a high, vibrating note, and vanished into the rocks with impossible speed. The others followed. Kayla turned, fury in her expression, but said nothing. The moment was gone. That night, the predators did not return. They didn't attack, didn't watch, didn't come near. Something had changed. Kayla sat alone again this time. The heat returned with the morning, thin sunlight filtering through the polluted skies and casting everything in a jaundiced glow. Kayla sat sharpening her blade on a smooth shard of rock, the rhythmic scrape echoing against the outpost walls. The rest of the squad avoided her now, not out of hostility, but unease. Something had shifted in their perception of her. They didn't understand what she had done the night before, but they understood enough to be wary. Sergeant Haven hadn't spoken to her since the encounter. Orders came through Drex or the comms, never directly. Kayla didn't mind. She'd been isolated before. On Veros, isolation had been a gift. Now it was a tool. The silence between soldiers thickened as the day wore on. They busied themselves with routines, patrols, data retrieval from half-burnt terminals, drone repairs. But everyone knew they were stalling. The real mission, to find out what had wiped out the previous garrison, had taken a back seat to survival. They were waiting for something. Reinforcements, maybe, or a clean excuse to evacuate. Kayla, however, wasn't waiting. She had questions the others didn't think to ask. Why had the creatures come so close without attacking? Why retreat from a lone cadet when they had taken down trained soldiers before? She slipped out past the perimeter just after midday, leaving a decoy tracker active in her armor to simulate stationary vitals. The terrain beyond the outpost fell into low, jagged ravines and trenches like ancient battle scars. The deeper she descended, the more the ground changed, less dust, more obsidian-like surfaces beneath the soil, warm to the touch and pulsing faintly beneath her boots. Kayla followed the signs. Scorched rock here, cracked bones there, all recent. The creatures were not nomadic. They had a den or a base, or something like it. If they'd chosen not to attack, then maybe their behavior was territorial, defensive. She found a tunnel entrance nestled in the crook of a cliff. It was partially collapsed, but the opening was wide enough to squeeze through. Inside it was humid, the air heavy with that same chemical ozone stench. She didn't light a torch. Instead, she switched her visor to thermal and pushed forward into the dark. The tunnel sloped downward, winding at impossible angles. The walls pulsed faintly, organic, but fused with metal. Not natural. Kayla's pulse quickened. These weren't just predators. They were builders. She reached a chamber half the size of the outpost, glowing with soft blue veins running through the walls like arteries. At the center was a mound, a nest, perhaps, constructed of fused rock and chitin. Surrounding it were remains, not just bones, gear, armor fragments, dog tags. She moved closer, scanning the environment. No signs of recent life, no movement, but her presence hadn't gone unnoticed. Behind her, a faint clicking rose, followed by a low, guttural trill. She turned slowly, blade already drawn. One of the creatures stood in the tunnel, watching. It was the same one from the night before, or another of its kind. Hard to tell. Its body shimmered again with that refractive camouflage, but in this enclosed space, the illusion was imperfect. Kayla saw its head tilt, studying her. She didn't run. Instead, she sheathed her blade and raised her hand slowly, palms open. The creature made no move to approach. "I'm not here to fight," Kayla said aloud, unsure if the creature could interpret language or even tone. "I just want to understand." The creature took a cautious step forward, then another. When it reached the edge of the chamber, it emitted a pulse, a sharp, vibrating note that resonated in Kayla's bones. The walls responded. Symbols lit up across the nest's surface, pictographs and swirling lines forming a pattern that Kayla's suit struggled to translate. Then, without warning, the creature turned and fled, disappearing back into the tunnel. Kayla stood there, breath steady, heart racing. That pulse, it hadn't been an attack. It was a signal, a warning, or maybe an invitation. She didn't chase. Instead, she captured a few scans of the chamber before retracing her steps. As she emerged into daylight, the wind had shifted again. This time, it carried sound distant engines. The squad's comms crackled. Unmarked vessel descending, not from high command. Kayla sprinted the last 100 meters back to the outpost, her armor flecked with dust and sweat. As she crested the outer ridge, she saw it, a sleek, black ship dropping from the sky, no visible insignia, no hailing signal. It touched down with eerie silence. Sergeant Haven was already in position with the rest of the squad, weapons drawn. "That's not one of ours," he growled. "No," Kayla said, still catching her breath. "It's worse." The ship's doors opened. For figures emerged, clad in polished exosuits with crimson visors and plasma rifles slung at their sides. Corporate mercenaries. Black site clearance. The kind of men who didn't exist in official records. Kayla recognized their insignia. Vulcan Systems, one of the galaxy's most powerful bioweapons research firms. "Relax," the lead merc called out, his voice calm and laced with arrogance. "We're just here to recover an asset." Haven didn't lower his weapon. "There are no assets here. Just death." The merc smiled thinly. "Not anymore." Kayla stepped forward. "You're talking about the creatures, aren't you?" The lead merc turned to her, as if noticing her for the first time. "Smart cadet. They're not indigenous. We bred them here. Adaptive hunters. Test subjects for planetary warfare. Problem is, they outgrew their parameters. They wiped out a full garrison," Kayla said coldly. "That was an unfortunate lapse in containment." "You lost control," she said. The merc's smile widened. "Not lost, just relocated. And now, Thanks to you, we know where to find them again. He tapped the device on his forearm. At once, a signal burst across the field. Kayla's HUD spiked. Frequencies warping, system overrides kicking in. They tagged me, she realized aloud. The merc raised his rifle casually. And that makes you the perfect bait. Kayla's blade was in her hand before she realized it, but it was too late. The soldiers closed in, rifles raised. Have embarked for cover. Gunfire erupted. Plasma scorched the dirt. Drex fell. The rest scattered. Kayla rolled behind the outpost south barricade, her heart thundering. This wasn't just cleanup. This was an extraction, and she was expendable. Through the chaos, the ridge to the east trembled. Then came the screech. Not mechanical. Not human. Something tore to the top of the outpost, all teeth and speed and rage. One of the mercs screamed as he was lifted into the air, torn in half before his rifle clattered to the ground. Another tried to retreat, but a second predator dropped from above, landing with a bone-crunching thud. Kayla didn't waste the opening. She sprinted across the field, grabbing Drex's sidearm as she passed his crumpled form. Sergeant Haven fired twice at a predator and missed both times before being swatted into the wall like an insect. The battlefield was chaos, but Kayla saw a pattern. The predators weren't attacking the squad, only the mercs. They were targeting the ones who brought them here, who tried to control them. Kayla didn't stop to question it. She reached the eastern ridge and turned to see one of the larger creatures, scarred and limping, yet still formidable, staring straight at her. It held one of the mercs in its jaws. Then, slowly it released the body and the wind howled across the dead plateau, rattling the scorched metal ruins of the outpost like brittle bones in a forgotten grave. Kayla stood at the edge of the landing zone, her boots scuffed, armor scorched, her blade still red from the fight. Around her, the battlefield lay silent. No mercs, no movement, no sound save for the wind and the low hum of her suit's emergency systems. She was alone, not just physically, but in a deeper, more permanent way. Drex was gone. Haven too, the last of her squad reduced to blood and smoke, their story swallowed by a war they hadn't been meant to survive. The command relay was fried. Communications were jammed. The only signal she could still detect was the one the Vulcan mercs had embedded in her, faint, pulsing like a dying star. She could cut it out, probably, but something told her not to. Instead, Kayla turned from the ridge and began walking, not toward shelter, not toward safety, toward answers. The creatures hadn't killed her. 3 times now, they had chosen to spare her when they had no reason to. It wasn't chance. It wasn't mercy. It was recognition. And if Vulcan's Bioweapons division had engineered these things, designed them for planetary control, obedience, death, then their failure to contain them wasn't a failure of programming. It was a rebellion. Kayla descended into a ravine where she'd found the den. The tunnel had collapsed partially since her last visit, likely from the tremors during the battle. She squeezed through a narrow crack in the rock and entered the deeper chambers. The organic glow had dimmed, but the symbols were still there, etched into the walls, flickering faintly. She moved carefully, deeper this time, letting instinct guide her. The air thickened, not with rot or decay, but with presence, awareness. And then she saw it, a chamber larger than before, like the hollowed-out heart of a mountain. In the center stood a pillar, tall, organic, pulsing faintly with that same blue light. Embedded in its surface were fragments of armor, not Vulcan, not standard issue. Alien. Kayla approached, heart pounding. The designs etched into the pillar shifted as she neared. Her HUD glitched, scrambled, then went dark completely. Her suit systems shut down one by one, leaving only the sound of her breathing. The room came alive. A dozen of them stepped forward from the shadows. The creatures, taller than her by a head, each adorned differently. One with a jagged crest, another with spiraling scars burned into its carapace. The one she recognized, the scarred one from before, approached. Kayla raised her hand slowly. It did not attack. Instead, it moved to the pillar and pressed a clawed hand to its surface. The pillar responded with a pulse, and a projection erupted. Light bending to form images, humans in Vulcan armor, injecting larvae into dormant forms. Weaponized evolution. Then came the images of the creatures rebelling, destroying their captors, escaping containment, carving out their sanctuary in the mountains. Then a ghostly image of Kayla from a night of the first encounter, standing alone, blade drawn, surrounded and yet untouched. They were trying to communicate. Kayla took a slow step forward and pressed her palm to the pillar. The surge of information nearly knocked her to ground. She saw everything. The experiments, the betrayals, the attempted neural overrides that failed spectacularly. The creatures had not only survived, they had learned, grown. Their minds were collective, not just instinctive but strategic. And most astonishingly, they remembered individuals, faces, voices, intent. They had spared Kayla because she wasn't part of the system that made them. She wasn't Vulcan. She had looked into their eyes and chosen not to kill. That mattered. She opened her eyes, breath shaky. "I'm not your enemy," she said quietly. The scarred one tilted its head. Then, slowly, it turned and gestured deeper into the tunnel. An invitation. Kayla followed. What she found made her stop in awe. A vast chamber lined with incubation pods, some dormant, others flickering with faint energy. But in the center was something new, something human. A data core, Vulcan designed, still functional. Kayla approached and connected her suit's emergency link. Files spilled open. Research logs, mission transcripts, directives from Vulcan Command. The goal had never been planetary control. It had been infiltration. They wanted to seed these bioweapons across rival systems, using their adaptability to blend in, to conquer from within. But the creatures had seen through the deception, had turned, had hidden, and now Vulcan wanted them back. A shiver ran down Kayla's spine, because now she understood what the mercs had meant by recover the asset. They weren't here to kill the predators. They were here to recapture them, to resume control. She disconnected and stepped back. The scarred creature watched her, eyes unblinking, waiting. "You want to stop them," Kayla said softly. The creature did not nod, but something in its stillness was affirmation. Kayla clenched her fists. "Then you need me." It was not a plea. It was a truth. Vulcan would send more teams, smarter ones, ships with orbital weapons, suppression fields, scorched earth directives. But Kayla could give these creatures what they lacked. A voice, a tactic, a warning. They had spared her. Now, she would return the favor. She walked to the pillar and reached for her blade. With a practiced swipe, she cut through her forearm armor and exposed the skin. Blood welled up. She pressed her palm to the base of the pillar, her life force mingling with theirs. A bond. The scarred creature stepped forward and did the same. They stood in silence for a moment. Then the chamber dimmed, the incubation pods slowly powering down. A ripple of readiness moved through the ranks. Kayla turned and began walking back toward the surface. Outside, the wind was shifting again. Dark shapes moved in the sky. More ships. The next wave. But she wasn't running. She was preparing. Because this time, when Vulcan came, they wouldn't face a scattered, dying squad. They would face something they hadn't prepared for. Unity. And Kayla, just a cadet from a Deathworld, was no longer alone.